When I was young, I used to look up at rich people and dream about what their life must be like. What does it really look like behind closed doors? The holidays these people must go on, the cars that they drive, the clothes that they wear, the things that they get to experience, and the people that they know. And now over the last decade, I've built a $40 million property portfolio. I've got businesses that operate across Australia, generating tens of millions of dollars worth of revenue on a yearly basis. I've got the boats, the cars, the bikes, the homes, the private chef. I've been on the holidays. I've spoken on the stages, and I've connected with global icons like Richard Branson, Alex Hormozi, and Tony Robbins. Everything that I ever dreamed about as a kid, I've lived it before the age of 30 years old. And here's the thing, the reality of success is nothing like I expected it to be. I grew up in the western suburbs of Sydney, about 75 k's from Sydney CBD, in a suburb called Wilberforce. And my perception of wealth when I grew up was the family that had the house on the river, they had a Land Cruiser, they had the wakeboard boat, and to me, these people just seemed happier and they seemed to have less stress and less worries than I did in my own life. And at that time, I had almost zero stress and worries in my life. And to me, at that point in my life, from when I was probably 5 to being in my mid-teenage years, material possessions exemplified happiness. I thought that the more stuff that I had, or the more stuff that other people had, the happier they must be, the less stress they must have in their life, and the easier their life is on a day-to-day basis. And to be honest, that is the thing that lit the fire inside of my stomach to want to go out there and to want to chase all of these things, because I thought that if I get these things, I am going to be happier and my life is going to be easier. So the faster that I got them, the easier my life would be for a longer period of time. And that's what led me on the journey to go out and buy my first property at 18 and to start my first business and to really focus on increasing my income, because if I increased my income and I increased my wealth, the more things that I could get and the easier my life would be. Well, I can assure you that I was very, very wrong, because I have all of that stuff and more. I've got more money and more wealth and more possessions than anyone that I knew growing up. And I can assure you, my life now is more complex, has moments of more unhappiness than I ever had growing up as a kid. Now, there's a good chance that if you're watching this video, you're on a similar journey. You are on the journey of wanting to grow wealth, of wanting to get out of the position that you are currently in. And that is the reason you are watching videos like this. And now for me to tell you that it's not all as it seems, and it's probably not going to be as good as you think it's going to be when you get this stuff, would be naive of me. Because lots of people told me as I was growing up, money does not equal happiness, and having all of these things is not going to make your life any better, which is easy for people to say. But from my own experience, I needed to go out there and I needed to actually experience all this stuff to actually realize that it wasn't as good. Now, as soon as I could afford to buy my first supercar, which I did at 23 years old, I went out there and bought it. As soon as I could get the place next to the beach and live by the ocean, I did it. And every time that I went and did one of these things and I got one of these things, I realized that there was this moment of euphoria for maybe 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, depending on what it was. And then all of a sudden it went away and I just wanted that next thing. I wanted to chase the next thing and I wanted to get that thing that I didn't already have. And the stuff that I already had all of a sudden become less relevant to me because I had ticked that box. And it was only as I started to acquire more and more and more and go and do more and more stuff and experience more and more things that I realized that this is a never-ending pursuit of nothing. And you know, it's funny because before you get any of the stuff, you look on things like Instagram and Facebook and YouTube and you look at the people that have the stuff and that flaunt the stuff. And before you could get it, you are very impressed by those things. You're like, wow, how awesome is that? I wonder what it feels like. That's how I felt. But now I've gotten all of the stuff and I know how to get it. None of that stuff impresses me. The stuff that impresses me right now is the stuff that I can't get easily and that I don't have. The stuff that impresses me now are people who generally don't flash their wealth at all, but have built businesses that do billions and billions of dollars a year in revenue. It's the athletes that you wouldn't even know about that you meet randomly and they say, I just ran a 300-mile run, for example. It's all of the things that I don't see and that are not flashed about on social media that are now the most impressive to me because they are the hardest things to get. What I've realized is material possessions are the easiest things to get when you are building wealth. It's all of the things that you can't see at face value that are actually the hardest things to get. And this is where my lessons have come from. Now, the first lesson that I probably only got 12 to 24 months ago, where it really hit home, is it's never going to be enough. You think when you don't have any money, as soon as I've got $100,000 in the bank, I'll be happy. Well, as soon as you get the 100,000, I can assure you the next thing you want's $1 million. And when you get the $1 million, the next thing you want is more than that. So it's never going to be enough. It's a never-ending pursuit. You get the supercar and all of a sudden you look to the right and someone's got a better supercar. The first time you fly first class, it's amazing. But then all of a sudden you start thinking about, oh, I wonder what it's like to fly private. I wonder what it's like to not have to wait at the airport. And where this really hit home was I was in Europe last year, sitting on the balcony of a hotel in Positano, looking out at the ocean. It cost me $40,000 for 4 nights at this hotel. As I'm looking out at the ocean, there is a huge mega yacht out there, which happened to be Mark Zuckerberg's mega yacht. And I was thinking, wow, I wonder what it'd be like to be on that boat. Here I am sitting in one of the best hotels in the world that I've worked my ring off to be able to be at. And I'm looking out at someone who is 100 or 1,000 times further down the track than what I am, thinking, I wonder what it's like to be on that yacht. Where what I should have been thinking about is, how nice is this hotel? I can't believe I'm here. And that's the thing about accumulating wealth and accumulating experiences, is that enough is never enough. There is always someone with more. There is always someone that has the thing that you now want because you don't have it. And if you keep channeling your energy to just get more for the sake of getting more, it is a very, very lonely journey, I can assure you. And like I said, it's easy for me to say this now to people who probably haven't experienced it. And it's also easy for people to probably comment on this video and say, you just seem like an unhappy, miserable prick. But I guarantee those people have never been on the pursuit. They've actually never started to tick off these goals and realize, oh, I just keep lifting the bar higher and higher and higher, until you eventually get to the point and say, well, when is this ever going to end? Especially when you're tying your happiness and your self-worth to these material possessions. That is why these luxury brands like your Louis Vuitton and your Hermes are so big and so powerful. People, when they buy a Louis Vuitton handbag, for example, or a piece of clothing and they wear it, it shows the world that they are a certain person. It shows the world that they are at a certain status and that they have a certain level of money to be able to have those things. Which also means you tie a level of your self-worth to this material possession, which actually means it's not even your self-worth, because it is tied to a material possession that can be taken away from you, which means your self-worth can be taken away. And the reason I said before what I admire now are the things that you can't see is because I've also gone on the other journey, which is, how do I continue to push myself physically to achieve the same feeling that I thought these material possessions would achieve? So for example, if someone wears a Louis Vuitton bag, or they're on a super yacht, or they're at some type of hotel, or they're driving a certain car, you can see those things, and what that person thinks is that you perceive them as being a certain type of person. But if you were driving around in the worst car ever, but you had just run a 205-mile run, someone would perceive you as being not very rich, but the self-worth that you get from running a 205-mile run, for example, which is one of the hardest things known to mankind, which I have done, is 100 times more than the self-worth and the fulfillment that you get from going out there and acquiring a material possession. But you cannot see it to the blind eye unless you're having a conversation with someone. They don't know that you've done an extreme physical challenge. So with doing physical challenges, for example, like 200-mile runs, I'm still channeling that it's never enough mentality and I always want more. But the difference between wanting more and chasing material items versus chasing things like these extreme physical challenges is, as I'm chasing more and I'm achieving these things, I'm getting a huge sense of self-fulfillment, a huge sense of confidence building, and it's actually going towards something that makes my life better, not something that makes my life more empty. So my learning is, having that internal feeling of it's never enough is not necessarily a bad thing. It's actually a very good thing, I believe, because it's a good driver, but you need to channel that into things that actually make your life better and more fulfilled, versus making your life more empty and less fulfilled. But again, sometimes you have to go through that acquisition of material possessions to then work out, hey, that car, that watch, that holiday, that house is not necessarily as good as I thought it would be, but doing something else, for example, which is just as hard, but in a different element of your life, gives you a huge amount of self-fulfillment and a huge amount of self-confidence. Now, the second lesson that I've learned after acquiring a huge amount of wealth in a relatively short period of time is that money only fixes money problems. Now, when I was young, what I thought was rich people and people that had money had no problems in their life, because it's like, what problems could you truly have if you've got money? Because money can solve all the problems. When the reality is, money only solves money problems. You can't buy your way out of an unhappy life. You can't buy your way out of feeling not very motivated. You can't buy your way out of having a terrible relationship with your partner or your staff or your friends in your life. And to be honest, money probably exacerbates those problems. When you have money and you have material possessions, like I said, and you have all of the stuff, you then start to question, well, why aren't I happy? How can I not be happy when I have all of these things? And because I was so gung-ho on just acquiring more and getting more wealth and getting more money, you actually then start to neglect all those other things in your life, and they actually start to get worse. And what I found is it actually makes things a lot harder. One thing I can assure you is when you have very little and you are chasing, it's much easier to get out of bed in the morning to go and do your training or to get up and go to work, because you have something to get up and go to work for, and you're almost forced to go and do that stuff. When you start to have a little bit more and you have less reliance on having to get up every day, it makes those things harder. So what I've learned is money is only one area of your life, and it is not all areas of your life. You know, I see people all the time, whether it's commenting on Instagram posts or YouTube videos or whatever it is, and they're miserable fucking people. They're unhappy inside, and often their message or the thing that they're portraying through their comments is like, oh, it's easy for you to say fucking rich people, or like property shouldn't be used as a wealth creation vehicle, it should be used for housing, whatever it is. And these people are just intrinsically negative and angry about the world. So one thing that I now know is if I give that person lots and lots of money, they're not going to become happier. And I actually think those people would become a lot more unhappy, because now they have the thing they thought would make them happy. And when they realize that the thing they thought would make them happy actually doesn't make them happy, they become more and more unhappy. So money makes things in your life easier that require money. But things that don't require money, it actually makes those things much, much harder. The third lesson that I have from getting everything that I wanted before the age of 30 is that fear is a better driver than lust. And what I mean by that statement, lust or desire or wanting something really bad gets you started on the journey. But it wears off pretty quickly when times get tough, or when things aren't going to plan, or it is different from the way that you would imagine it. And I've experienced this multiple times. And I'm going to run you through 3 different times that lust only got me so far, and then fear was the kick in the guts that I needed, and what happened in each of those instances. So there's 3 examples I'm going to run you through. The first one was when I moved out of construction and mining into the property sector, which is what I am in right now. I was in construction and mining. I was earning somewhere between $120,000 to $200,000 a year, depending on the year I was in there. I really wanted to get out of that industry into property because I had this huge passion for real estate. I looked at it every day. I researched it every day. I'd constantly watch videos like this. The lust was the thing that got me wanting to go on the journey. The lust was, oh, I could get into property. I could do what I want every day. I wouldn't have to listen to someone tell me what to do. And I see people make lots and lots of money, and that's amazing. When I got out of construction, I made the transition. The lust wore off really, really quickly. And the reason it wore off really, really quickly is because the way that I imagined getting into the property industry and what the reality of getting into the property industry were 2 very different things. I thought nice suits, nice cars, driving around, great suburbs and looking at beautiful houses. That was 1% of it. And the other 99% was being in the office, constantly being on the phone, getting told to fuck off and getting rejected constantly, not making as much money as I thought. And then 3 or 4 months into my new career, this beautiful thing called COVID hit. But the thing was, I moved out of an industry where I got paid every single week, regardless of whether I showed up to work or not, right? Because I was a full-time employee. So I got holidays, sick days, all that jazz. So if COVID hit in that industry, it wouldn't have affected me. Now I was in property, COVID hit, I wasn't getting paid a salary. I was a contractor, which meant I earned $0. So during that time, what do you reckon got me through it? Do you reckon the lust of, oh, when I get through COVID, I'm gonna make all this money and, you know, have this incredible life? No, because I wasn't thinking like that. It was the fear that got me through it. It was the fear of going, fuck, I'm not going back to work in the construction industry. I didn't like it and I don't want to go back there. What can I do to force my way into success? So it was the fear of failure and the fear of having to go back to doing what I was doing for the past 8 years or 10 years, whatever, how long it was. So it was the fear that got me through it. It was not the lust, because the lust wears off, really quickly. The second example is back in 2023. Now, I'd been in the industry for a few years, the business had grown, I'd personally grown my profile, and there was a few people inside of the industry that did not like Jack Henderson, and that is okay. But they set out on their world's mission to make my life hell. They were making stories up, they were going to the media, and essentially one of their stories caught on and I got absolutely hammered in the media. So for 6 or 8 months, I was on the front page of newspapers, I was on the ABC, I was featured in all of these places where I didn't want to be featured. And it was all based on a false narrative that ended up coming out in the end, but unfortunately in the time, it was hell for me. Now, at the same time, my partner also got diagnosed with breast cancer. So 2023 was a very challenging year mentally and physically for myself and my partner. Do you think during that time, it was the lust that was getting me through it, going, oh, this is okay, you know, flashy stuff, money, you know, blah, 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 blah? Or do you think it was the fear? The fear of my business being hammered, me being embarrassed in the media based on something that was false, my partner potentially not being around, having to go through chemo and all that jazz? Well, I can assure you it was the fear. The fear is the thing that made us push on. The fear was the thing that lit a fire inside of my belly to go, I'll show these motherfuckers who's going to come out on top. And again, with the health thing, it was like, what do we need to do to make sure we have the highest probability of beating this horrible disease? So it's the fear that pushes you into momentum and drives you towards your goal. You might be sitting there right now thinking, I want to do all of this stuff. I want to have a big portfolio, I want to make heaps of cash, I want to drive cool cars, go on nice boats, fly all over the world, give my family the life that I want, whatever it is. Those things are all things of lust. They're all things that you desire. But when the rubber hits the road and the excitement of all that wears off and you're back into reality, the thing that's going to push you forward from my personal experience is fear. So using hard times and using things that scare you and using things that are trying to crush you as your fuel and as your motivation to push you towards the things that you do lust, but those things that you lust are not going to be the things that push you in the right way. And I can assure you, I've seen lots and lots of people come and go out of, you know, the industry and you know, different circles. People who get, you know, not lucky, but they might start off, have a lot of success, things get hard, and then they go by the wayside. It's usually because they don't have anything driving them. They don't have that fear driving them. And that is why I've said it before and I'll say it again. If you grow up and you have conflict in your life growing up when you're young and you have a hard upbringing, that is often a better thing than growing up when everything's happy, daisy and rosy. Because when everything's happy, daisy and rosy, you don't have any adversities to drive you forward. You don't have that chip on your shoulder to prove the world wrong and prove your doubters and your haters wrong in your own little world, because you've had life and it's been on easy mode. So you're like, fuck, whatever it is. So I can assure you, having a hard upbringing is one of the biggest superpowers if you leverage it, and it will drive you to get you anything and everything that you want in your world. Now, lesson number 4, and one of the biggest realizations that I've had over the last 10 years from starting my property investing journey back in 2015 to now recording this video in 2025 is you think money is going to solve all the problems, and you think that when you have money, you're not going to have the stresses anymore of the normal bills and day-to-day life that most people stress about. So this lesson is all around the more money you make, it doesn't make anything easier. The bills just have more zeros on. The bills get bigger. And that is exactly what it says right here. It just says the bills get bigger. So if I go back to 2012, 13, 14, when I was, you know, in my late teens, early 20s, going to the petrol station, for example, and looking at fuel being whatever it was, $1.80, $2 a litre, and filling up my car and spending $200 on fuel, that is something that, you know, I didn't have to beg, borrow, and steal for, but it was a cost I had to think about based on my budget at that point in time. You know, going out to a restaurant, for example, and spending $100, $200, $300 on a dinner was something I had to think about. Buying birthday gifts and all of that stuff was something that I had to think about, and it's something that you stress about to do with money in your, or in my world at that point in time. As I've started to make more money, what happens is you don't all of a sudden keep the same bill. So let's hypothetically say you make $100,000 a year, you've got $15,000 to $20,000 a year of surplus cash, and you've got $80,000 worth of bills. As you make $200,000 a year, your bills don't stay at $80,000 and you don't now have $120,000 worth of surplus, your bills generally double. So you now have $160,000 worth of bills and $40,000 worth of surplus, and sometimes more. And that just gets bigger and bigger and bigger as time goes on. 10 years ago, my biggest bill would have been a strata cost for an apartment, or a big repair bill, for example, on a car, or planning to go on a holiday. All of these things were big costs. And at that point in my life, that was the cost associated with my life. But now as I've gotten on, I don't have to worry about those types of things. But now my bills are paying payroll, a big tax bill, much larger property-related expenses. I'm now responsible for a lot more people, so I have to pay for a lot more stuff. So what happens is, as you make more money, as the zeros on your income get bigger, the bills just scale with them. So now instead of worrying about putting $200 a week of fuel in my car, I'm worrying about paying a superannuation bill next week of $150,000 to $200,000. So the actual stresses that relate to money don't get any easier. What happens is the bills that you pay with that money just get bigger. So instead of worrying about a $200 bill, you're worrying about a $20,000 or $200,000 or a $2 million bill. And that just continues to happen as you go further and further up the chain. And I know that's hard for people to conceptualize, because you're like, oh yeah, if I just earned more money, everything would be okay. But what happens is you earn more money and you spend more money. Your lifestyle gets better. You generally have more responsibilities. It doesn't make anything any easier. If I'm completely honest, it probably makes things more stressful, because internally now I feel like I've got a lot more responsibility. I've got a lot more people relying on me, and I'm constantly thinking about, I've got to pay this, I've got to do this, I've got this bill coming up. If you have a tough month in business, for example, you're not just relying on yourself, you're relying on, 100 odd staff around you. So the big misconception that I had before I started making more and more money, and before I started getting more and more stuff, is that when I get more money, the stress that's related with money will subside. When in actual reality, what happens is you start to make more money, you spend more money, because the only way you can make more money is to spend more money. It doesn't just magically pop out of the air. And there's a lot more responsibilities, and there is a lot more highs and lows, especially when you're running an organization, or you're in a sales role, or you're in a role where you control your own income. Because it's not just always this upward trajectory. You have good months and bad months, good quarters and bad quarters, good years and bad years, and you need to be able to balance that out. So as you make more money, as you grow more wealth, I can assure you, your money problems are not going to go away. The money problems that you worry about right now will no longer exist, because they're obviously of a smaller scale, but you will worry about problems just like them that just have more zeros attached to them. And that was one of the biggest things I learned. I'm like, fuck, I remember when I used to worry about shit, like a smaller bills to me at the time that felt really big. And now, I don't really have to worry about where I'm tapping my car here, there, and everywhere. But tomorrow I could get a $150,000 bill that I didn't expect. I'm like, fuck, that's annoying. And I actually listened to an Alex Hormozi podcast the other day, and he spoke about this exact thing. Now you think Alex Hormozi is worth a couple of $100 million, whatever it is. He all of a sudden was going through something, I don't know exactly what it was, and he had an 8-figure bill that he had to pay within 72 hours. Now for people who are still trying to work out 8 figures, 8 figures is a bill that would be north of $10 million. If someone right now who was earning $100,000 a year got a $10 million bill, they'd have zero chance of being able to pay that. So it doesn't even register, and you're like, what could possibly cost that amount of money? But as you scale up, there are things that can happen. You could get fines, you could, have big disasters that you've got to sort out inside of the business. All of a sudden you could have a disagreement with a partner that you've got to buy out, or whatever it is. The bills get much bigger. So imagine having to then go and find $10 million. Someone who's worth that amount of money is great, but they may not have that much liquid or cash sitting there. So they've got to go find that cash to pay that bill, which is no different to someone earning $100,000 a year having to pay a $1,000 or a $10,000 bill. So if you think your money problems are going to go away as you make more money, they are not. I can guarantee it. The bills that you worry about will just have more zeros attached to the end, and you will actually have a lot more stress in being able to resolve those. Lesson number 5 is what everyone thinks is when you make more money, you've got more freedom and you can just do whatever you want. You can be sitting on a yacht in Monaco, you can just go to the racetrack every day with your fucking Porsche, and you can just enjoy the good life, right? Because you're rich, and when rich people are rich, they don't have to work. Wrong. That is wrong, okay? And that is a misconception that I had before I started to run a business and make more money. The reality is, regardless if you are starting a business, you are progressing in your career, you are doing anything that generally makes more money, to make more money, you don't have to work less, you have to work more. And I know that may be hard to believe, but the only people who get more money and work less are people who win the lotto. And generally what happens to people who win the lotto is they win it, then they lose it, and they have to go back to work anyway. You have to work more when you make more money. So I had this misconception, and I used to see all these people who were on boats and they had the race cars and they were on holidays all the time and all of this stuff. And you think, fuck, I just want to get to that level so I can do all of that stuff. But what I've found is the more money that I've made and the bigger the P&L and the greater things look, the less and less time I've had to do anything. Now, right at the start, so I'm talking like 2021, 2022, when I didn't have a lot of staff and it was really just me and a few people, I had a lot of surplus money and, to be honest, probably a little bit more time than I do right now. But it was like that sweet spot of the business wasn't really that big at all. It was really just a 1 or 2 man band. I was essentially paid like a consultant is paid, and I had more time. But as the business has grown from that point, and I've had more staff and more responsibility and all that stuff, my free time has dramatically shrunk. There's been many times where business has been super busy or it's been challenging, like in the example I spoke about before, and I've had a holiday book that I've had to cancel, or I've had something booked that I couldn't do or couldn't go to, or I had these grandiose ideas of, you know, buying a car and being able to go to track days to network and all of this stuff, and it's never ever come to fruition. The higher the goal and the aspiration, the more you are going to work and the less free time you're going to have to do anything. And to be honest, the less appealing all of that stuff that you could be doing ends up being, because your passion belongs to whatever you are building. Now, when you make more money, it's just a byproduct of adding more value to people's lives. So I'm building the business now, and I can assure you, if you compare two things side by side, being at work, working inside of the business, growing and all that exciting stuff that comes with business, or doing something else outside of the business, I would choose being in the business 9 out of 10 times. Now, everyone needs a break, obviously. Everyone needs to go on holidays and spend time away from it. But when you are in this exciting building phase and you are growing, there is nothing more exciting in your life generally than your business itself. So I've got 2 boats, I've got 3 cars, I've got a nice house. I can do all the shit. I can go on the holidays and all that stuff, but I can assure you I never get time to do any of it. I've got a brand new boat that I bought on the river. I've been out in it once, and it's not because I can't. Like, I could leave work right now if I wanted to jump in the car and go to use it, but you need people to use it with, for starters, everyone working. And it's also, I feel guilty because I'm out on the boat and I'm like, oh fuck, I should be working. I should be growing the thing that I've been given the opportunity to grow. Same as cars, you know, I have lots of cars and I never ever drive them. I Uber to work every day. I mean, I don't have a license at the moment, but before then, I Uber to work every day. I Uber home. I don't go to tracks. I used to do the Bull Rush Rally once a year, but then I've canceled that the last couple of years because I haven't had really the capacity to want to do it. I built a motocross track. Great example. Bought a farm, wedding venue / farm, and one of the first things I do when I got the property is I built a motocross track, because growing up, all I wanted was my own motocross track, a professional track that I could go to and train on and have a lot of fun. I built this track, spent a lot of money building it, went and bought the brand new KTM, all the gear, and I've ridden it literally twice. 2 times I've ridden it. That is all in the last, I don't know, 18 months or something like that. And every time I go to the farm, I have a choice. Again, it's either to work on the property itself. There's so many things that need to be done to the property, continue to make it better so it can grow into a bigger business, or I can choose to ride. And I choose to do the stuff that's going to grow the business and make it better than doing the fun and enjoyment stuff. And I think that's the difference, is people who choose the fun and enjoyment stuff often don't grow the biggest businesses and the biggest lives and all the rest of it, because they choose the other stuff. Where if you constantly choose the work makes you more money so you can go and do more stuff, but the only reason you have the money to go and do the stuff is because you choose the work. So if you start to choose the money and the stuff, what will happen is it will start to dry up. People get to a point where it's called a lifestyle business or a lifestyle job where they have really good income and they choose lifestyle. And for those people, that is amazing. But I'm just purely talking about my own experience. And when I worked in a job, I was constantly thinking about doing other things. When I got to the weekend, I wanted to go party or ride or go on holidays. I was really excited about that stuff because I wasn't passionate and I didn't love what I was doing on a day-to-day basis. But now I do what I love. It's very, very hard to get the same energy and drive and excitement out of doing other stuff than working on the business. And it actually plays back to one of the lessons, which was fear is a better driver than lust. And what I mean by that and how it ties back is when I'm personally doing all of the stuff that's not business related, I'm thinking about business and I'm also feeling guilty that I'm not working in the business because I have the fear of what happens if I do too much of this and this is no longer around and I don't have the capacity to do it. So that also plays in my mind, and I know a lot of other business owners, a lot of other really, really wealthy people's minds, is that if they start doing more of the stuff that it's distracting them from what actually got them to the position to be able to have and do the stuff, you get guilty, you have fear. I don't know any business owner who goes on holidays for longer than a week and doesn't get itchy feet because they're not in their business and they're not doing the work that allows them to go on the holiday. So it's very much a balancing act. And it's probably got a lot to do with my age. I'm in my late 20s. If I was in my 50s or 60s and I'd had 30 years worth of work behind me, sure, maybe I could do more of the stuff and focus less on business because it's probably not that important at that point in time, or as important. But for me, I'm in the building phase, I'm in the working phase. The more time I put into work and the more time I put into growing the business and doing the stuff that has allowed me to have all of the stuff, the less time I've wanted to spend using the stuff. So it's very, very interesting. And the lesson again is more money equals more work, not less work. Unless you win the lotto, you're going to have to work more, sacrifice more to have more to be able to do. What I hope you've gotten out of this video is real wealth and real success is not Lambos, boats, yachts, helicopters, holidays, first class, all of that shit that you see on social media. If that is what's going to drive you and that is what makes you want to go and do the work, it'll wear off as soon as things get hard. And we're in a climate right now where it's likely going to get harder, not easier in time. AI, more competition, a tougher economy is going to make success even harder than it is right now. So the shiny stuff wears off and what actually builds real success is the real work, the sacrifice, and actually having the ability to go and do all the shiny stuff if you want to do it. So you know in your mind you can have it, but knowing that when you can have it, you actually don't want it. So if you want to see more into how I've built the success I've built in my 20s, then click and watch this video here where I go into it in much finer detail. And if you don't, then I'm glad you enjoyed this video. Like, subscribe, comment, all that shit. And if you don't want to do any of it, then I'll see you on the next video.